So good morning, ladies and gentlemen from New York. My name is Anthony Phillipson. I'm the Trade Commissioner for North America, covering the US and Canada, working with our trade and investment teams across the two countries. I'm also Consul General here in New York, working as part of the US network. And I'm delighted to have the chance to say a few words about what we're doing here in North America in partnership with UKEF, amongst other things. US and Canada, I think, two of our most important trade and investment partners. The US is our #1 export market. Canada is a top 20 export market. Canada is also a hugely important investor in the UK, and the US is our #1 investor and has been for some time. We have a very important market access agenda that we're pursuing with the two countries in order to enhance future opportunities for exports and investment. A lot of focus, of course, on the free trade agreement with the US that we kicked off in May. 5 rounds completed by the end of October, and now we're just pausing a little bit to wait and see what happens in the context of the US election. The transition has begun to President-elect Joe Biden and his team. We believe that the FTA offers real opportunities for both countries, including in the context of COVID recovery. And with Canada, we've just reached a really important continuity agreement. The UK benefited from the EU-Canada agreement that was signed a year or so ago, and now we've rolled that over and maintained the benefits for UK companies to lock them in, as we call it, but also to set the stage for future market access opportunities between the two countries. Alongside that, we have a really important focus at the minute on supply chains, not least in the context of the COVID crisis and the impact that has had. We've been working through Project Defend, presenting that to US and Canadian partners to explain to them what we're doing and sharing our analysis about the impact of the crisis on our supply chains and making sure that we can come back stronger and more resilient in the future. We also focus a lot on the industrial strategy, a really important part of the work that we do with policy teams across the two countries, and we also deliver a number of projects through the Prosperity Fund. It's a really important partnership between the public sector, private sector and academia in key sectors of the UK economy, and it's also where we work really closely with our Science and Innovation Network colleagues, part of delivering the Prime Minister's ambition for us to be an innovation nation and the best place in the world to create innovation, commercialise it and create market opportunity for companies across the UK. Which takes me to levelling up, a really important part of our strategic framing. Our network delivers for all parts of the United Kingdom, including small and medium-sized enterprises, really important focus on them. They're the lifeblood of our economies. And I like to say that even MNCs start out originally as SMEs. We've got some new resource coming into the network from the Northern Powerhouse and Midlands Engine. But as I say, the whole network focuses on delivering for all parts of the United Kingdom. We work very closely with the Export Information Service Network, the International Trade Advisors, and our business partner, OCO Global, on the export support side. 2021, I think, is just going to be an enormously important year for the United Kingdom. We will chair the G7 with its focus on economic resilience, global recovery, and global health issues, and especially other priorities like girls' education and women's equality. We will also chair the Climate Summit in Glasgow next November. We'll chair it with also be chairing the G20. So I think that's where a lot of those global leadership issues for the UK will come together. We will be outside the transition period, of course, by the end of December. We will have completed our process of leaving the European Union, and we'll be looking to mobilise all of our resources to maximise the opportunities for the UK in that context. And of course, we'll still be working through the impact of COVID. The COVID crisis, the pandemic, is resurging here in the US, Canada and in the UK. There is light at the end of the tunnel, the incredible work being done on vaccines, not least by Oxford University and AstraZeneca, but it's going to take a while, and the economic impact, I think, will continue all. And that's the strategic context in which we are looking to make sure that we use all of our resources with as much impact as possible to deliver trade, export, investment success for UK companies. We do that here in the US with our US and Canada, with our strategic focus on key sectors of the UK economy. We also deliver it through regional teams based in the consulates across the two countries. We're also looking to be fully plugged in to London teams, whether the sector teams, policy teams in DIT, other government departments and the devolved administrations. And we're really, really excited that we will soon be able to add UKEF resource to the network out here to enhance our partnership with them as well. We're currently advertising for a regional head to cover the US and Canada, probably will be based in either Chicago or Houston, and it will really add, I think, to our focus on clean growth and advanced manufacturing and looking for opportunities for UK companies in US and Canadian supply chains, especially sectors like aerospace. We will also be able to enhance the work that UKEF does with US and Canadian companies based in the UK, bringing UK companies into their supply chains and allowing them to qualify for UK support for third markets. And we'll hear more about that in a minute. At the same time, we of course will continue, I think, to be working virtually for some time. It's going to be a while before we get back to in-person events, normal business travel as we remember it, big trade delegations meeting for the big conferences. But that doesn't mean that business can stop. Absolutely vital for us to continue to bring conversations together between buyers and suppliers, between investors and investment opportunities. And actually, in a virtual world, there is no excuse for us not to be connected, including between ourselves and the London teams and the UK teams, but also around the world. The trade commissioners, we talk a lot about sharing best practice. There is always more that we can do to bring these conversations together. So I'm delighted to have a chance just to give you that quick overview of what we're doing here in North America. And now absolutely delighted to hand over to Rose Trigg, Regional Head covering this patch of the world in UKEF. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Anthony. That was a really insightful introduction. So as you introduced, my name's Rose Trigg, and I'm Regional Head for Business Origination, covering the Americas and Eastern Europe and Central Asia. So I may have spoken to many of you before. I might be a new face for some of you. I joined the team just over 3 months ago. So I'm really excited for this to be my first conference. And so as Anthony mentioned, North America, obviously a huge and strategically important market for the UK as a whole. And as an advanced economy, UKEF obviously has a massive market risk appetite to support exports to both the US and Canada. Naturally, with advanced markets, there may be higher demand for UKEF export credits in countries where there might be market gaps, where the private financing sector is unable to fill. But that doesn't mean we can't or we don't work with advanced economies like the US, like China, like Europe. So in fact, if you looked at all the transactions we did for a year, you would see the United States come up quite a lot by volume, actually. And by volume, many of those will be support. You may be familiar with some of the products that we offer there. So I'll start there, and then we'll move on to the kind of medium and long-term buyer side financing and how we work there. So on the short-term side, you might be familiar with working capital or export insurance policy. We often use these to help UK companies with the kind of the capacity and the security they need to fulfill orders to US buyers. So actually, post-COVID, our export insurance policy has been expanded to cover 180 countries, and that includes EU nations and the USA and Canada, as well as names like Iceland, Japan, New Zealand. And so a good example of how we work on the exporter short-term side is last year we supported a UK startup called Startle, and they were a tech startup where you were in venues, and it means that the customers can control the music like a jukebox, but from your mobile. And they had a huge 5.5 million order. It was really important for them with a national US retail brand. And so we helped them with the working capital support that they needed to fulfill that order and scale up their operations. And that brings me on to one of our newer products, actually, Export Development Guarantee. We refer to it as EDG. That can be used to scale up existing export activities. So it can help you access those high value loan facilities for your general working capital or your other capital expenditure purposes. It can support investment to increase that future export activity. That doesn't have to be linked to a specific export contract. That's what makes it different. And that can be used to increase exports to any market, including North America. So that's about it on the short-term side. Touching briefly on medium to long-term. So this is where we'd be supporting the liquidity needed for a project on the buyer side when the commercial bank's liquidity is not sufficient for it. So for example, that's often seen in major infrastructure projects. This is something we see less with North America because of that market sufficiency. But for example, we provided 45 million in direct lending and buyer credit support to Evraz in Canada. It's in 2015 for the upgrade of a steel mill, with the exporter being prime metals there. So we can North America as well. But what I'd really like to focus on actually is that kind of long-term buyer side support, but when we're working in a third country. So third country collaboration is something that is really important when we're working with US companies. many of you may not be familiar with this before, but we can work with foreign companies on their overseas enterprises if they bring the UK supply chain with them. As long as they buy enough from the UK, then the minimum requirement is at least met, then we can support that contract. And we can do that in two ways. It can either be the US company subcontracting to the UK supply chain, or quite often US multinationals will have operations in the UK, so we can consider them directly as if they have a UK side to their operations. So there's quite a few examples of how we do this with US contractors who are obviously very active around the world. So for example, GE, a big name, we supported them with 1.2 billion to build 2 power stations and reconstruct a number of electricity substations in Iraq. That was to help with the population's access to electricity. And we were able to do that because GE subcontracted with Enca UK. So they brought the UK supply chain with them and they allowed that UKEF support to be accessed. And this is quite a common structure that we use for energy projects around the world. Another place you'll see it being used quite often is in financing of aircraft. So obviously Boeing aircraft, when they're using parts from the UK, we can support their buyers. So for example, we've provided buyer credit around 40 million for South Africa, Boeing aircraft. You'll see quite often large companies that you may not consider as, that you may not associate them with the UK, but actually they'll have either connections with the supply chains in the UK or they'll have operations. So we don't always need to think just of classic UK names that might pop to the top of your head. So another important thing to flag is that we work very well with our counterparts US Exim and EDC. So these are the US and Canadian export credit agencies, and we can work with them on reinsurance in third countries. So when we're working on a project, say like the ones mentioned, where there's a large where there's maybe some US content and there's some UK content, whoever has the larger portion would front that financing and seek reinsurance from the other party. So that's often the way that ECAs will work together when we're working in third countries. So I'll wrap up around there. So to conclude, we can support the UK supply chain directly, and we do that quite often, but also we can work in the third country, and we're really keen to work with US contractors on their operations overseas. And in fact, as Anthony mentioned, while I've stepped in today as honorary country head for US, we're actually looking to appoint a country head who would be based in North America. And they can work closely with US companies on their operations in the US and overseas, and as well. So perhaps at the conference you'll be a new. And we'll stop there, and we'll be glad to take questions from the audience for the next sort of 10 minutes. Thank you very much.